الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وعملا يا رب العالمين. أما بعد. So tonight, inshallah, we're going to continue our exploration of this book right here, When Hearing Becomes Listening by Shaykh Smith. And we've been discussing this for a few weeks. And so, inshallah, we're going to continue as we make our way through it. The book is really about trying to understand the impact of prophetic listening on the people around the Prophet ﷺ. His ability to listen to people, make them feel heard, and how that impacted their receptivity to the message that he was trying to convey. And obviously, if you think about it, then we have a lot to learn from that aspect of his life as well, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That if we in our personal lives can make people feel heard and can listen to people, then they'll be more receptive to what we have to say. And every one of us wants to feel heard. Every one of us we have stuff to say that we want people to listen to. And so the first step before speaking is listening. Last session we had introduced this theory known as social brain theory. And essentially the two main premises of this theory is that human beings develop larger brains than other animals is because they live in complex societies and they have many interdependent relationships. So we talked about this last week. We talked about how at one time you're going to be a father but also a son. You're going to be a sister but also a wife. You're going to be a friend but also an employee to someone. And so you're playing all these different roles with all these different people around you. And so the size of a social group that a species can maintain is limited by its cognitive capacity. So we talked about how, just trying to if you have 5 friends, it can be easy to remember, if you pay attention, it can be easy to remember their names, their birthdays maybe, their preferences, what makes them happy, what upsets them, where they're from, about their family. But as we expand the friend group or the social group and try to maintain that level of depth to each relationship, it becomes almost impossible. It's really hard then to remember everybody's name. It's really hard to remember details about their lives. And as humans, we have a need to remember people. Like, how many people's names are you expected to remember on a daily basis? Any guesses? I don't have an answer either. I can't say yes or no, but what do you guys think? In one given day, how many names are you expected to remember? How many people you encounter and interact with whose names they expect you to remember?
5.
5 people? Okay. More than 3, sure.
25 to 50.
Yeah, I was thinking more like 20, 30, 40. No, seriously, because if you work in a workplace, you're probably expected to know most people's names. Just the names. Now, we're not even going beyond names, by the way. Huh? Not even what's their preferences, where do they live, what are their hobbies. No, just name. And to remember their name, that's good 20 at least. And then you have who? You have your friend group, whatever the size of that is, close friend group, 5, 10 people. Then you have your family. And then you have relatives who might call you. And you can't be picking up and going, huh? Aisha who? Right? And they're like, excuse me? I'm your cousin. Right? It's like insulting. So you have to remember your relative's name, maybe your neighbors. Now the number's going up. Do you see what I'm saying here? In any given day, you might interact with someone and you have to remember their name. And if you don't, it's insulting. To do that, you have to have great capacity. Do you get what I'm saying? To our knowledge, snails aren't doing that. Snails aren't going down the trail and encountering Bob, right? Snails are doing their thing. Human beings, because of the nature of our personalities and who we are, we have to remember people's names. Okay, so the larger the bonded group, the larger the cognitive load, and thus the larger the brain required. And so this would account for why we have such large brains. Now, the author introduces a topic here, which he calls mentalizing. And by mentalizing, he means the ability to think about what someone else is thinking. Right? So, being bonded with others, feeling connected to people, is by and large dependent upon the collective and individual ability to engage in complex communications. So, there's a lot we could talk about here, but because at a very high level, all of us, for example, we have some idea of what is expected social conduct, for example, in this setting. Which is why it's so hard to go to a new place. Because you're not sure what's the acceptable conduct. So at the end of the talk right now, do we clap? No, it's real quick. For someone who's new, do we clap? And then they might go to clap and notice no one's clapping and okay, I guess that's not what people do here. Right? But you might go to somewhere and you don't know that you're supposed to clap and everyone's clapping and you're like, oh, I guess I better clap too. And trying to figure out what the social conduct is. You walk in and take off your shoes. Oh, I didn't realize I had to take off my shoes. Or you take off your shoes and it's like, hey, put your shoes back on. What are you trying to do? Oh, sorry. To go to somewhere new, you have to learn the conduct. So at a certain level, we kind of all have this understanding of what's kind of expected. So everyone kind of walks in and we design our spaces to kind of facilitate that. So people walk in and typically they know which way to face because there's a chair here, which suggests that everybody faces the chair. And then we put these chairs down on the floor and people, okay, so you gotta face this way. Which then raises questions with salat. Because I've seen people, when salat time comes, they face this way. And then we have to tell them, no, face that way, right? So they don't know. Trying to get people to understand what is the conduct that everyone follows here. That's just at a collective level. At an individual level, it's, okay, how do I interact with someone? So if I walk in, honestly speaking, guys, it happens, right? Recently I remember they walked into my office and they were like, hi, and Muslim, fully, hi. And I was kind of like, hey, assalamu alaikum, right? I don't want to be assalamu alaikum, as though I'm correcting them for saying hi, because that sounds a little awkward too if I just, So I kind of responded with the hey, assalamu alaikum, and then they responded. But maybe they're not used to that. You understand? So there's an individual also, how do I meet somebody? How do I interact with them? What's appropriate wording? Recently I met someone, a friend, non-Muslim, at the gym, and he's like, how you doing? And I was like, alhamdulillah. And I realized, oh, alhamdulillah is not here. So I was like, yeah, I'm doing well. Because you realize in the moment, this is not what's I think he gets it. I think he understands what I meant, but we kind of adapt. It might even be loosely considered code switching here, right? Depending on where you are, you have to know what to say and how to say it. For example, you meet somebody, and let's say something really sensitive with them is that their father left when they were young. Now you have to remember that. You've thought about that? You have to remember that. Because now you can't suddenly be like, yo, just 2 hours ago, me and my dad were hanging out, and you're talking about the amazing time you had with your dad, and you're not trying to do anything or say anything. You're just sharing something genuinely that was meaningful to you. But that person, because you didn't acknowledge their sensitivity, your well-intentioned sharing ends up backfiring and actually maybe leaves them really hurt. Do you get what I'm saying? And so we have to think about it. We engage in very complex communication without realizing it. So you'll meet somebody and you'll have to remember, what did they tell me? What about their family? What about their situation? What if they just went through a divorce? And suddenly you're trying to like share how happy you are that you just got engaged and you're about to get married. Like, maybe not, right? You pull it back. So you look at the person you're speaking to and you kind of go, okay, what can I say? What can I not say? And we do make those judgments quite often. In the spur of the moment, we're able to do it. To do that, you have to have immense cognitive capacity, right? So mentalizing. So the ability to bond with others does depend on our ability to mentalize. And this is where you have what's called theory of mind. Theory of mind in kids is really interesting. With little children, for example, they have to develop slowly a theory of mind. So you'll have a young child, and the young child likes something. And they think everybody likes that. They think everybody likes that. Until somebody else, they quickly learn this. This doesn't take long. They really like this toy. And then another kid comes along and really likes that toy. And suddenly this kid is confused because this is my toy and I like this toy. But then they discover, wait, other people might have the same likes. Or they really like a certain candy. And they'll go to you and say, here, have it. And you're like, I don't like it. It's confusing. Wait. Oh, you have your own desires. You have your own preferences, and oh, we're different like that. For a young child, you discover, oh wait, I have my desires, my preferences, and other humans have their desires and their preferences. And that's just in terms of like preferences. There's a test that they do, just to like test theory of mind. And so that would be, for example, if you had two people in a room here, two adults, and there's a child that's watching. The child's sitting on the side watching. So the first adult, in front of them is a basket. And then the second adult has a box in front of them. So the first adult takes a ball and puts it inside their basket. The other, or the first adult who put the ball in the basket walks out of the room. The other adult moves the ball from the basket to the box, whilst the first adult's outside of the room. Now when the adult walks back in, the question you ask the child here is, where will this adult who's walking in look for the ball? Do you understand the test here? Where will the adult look for the ball? If the child doesn't realize that, wait, I can have access to knowledge that that adult might not have access to, they're going to assume that the adult knows what they know. So they're going to say, well, the adult who's outside of the room will come and check inside the box. Of course, because that's where the ball is. But if they've developed theory of mind, intellectually, cognitively, they'll recognize that, wait, no, I know the ball's in the box because I saw the adult move the ball from the basket to the box. This adult who's just coming in did not see that. So they probably still think the ball's in the basket. So then their answer would be, yeah, this adult's going to assume it's still in the basket. And that's how you can test theory of mind. Does this child realize that other people may not have access to the same knowledge that I have access to? And therefore they may see things differently than I do? And this is a process that we engage in. You can also, at a certain point, people realize that what? Children will realize as they get older that people can be very mistaken. And they can be sincere in their mistake. Do you get that? Because initially, how do we respond to someone saying something incorrect? For example, they'll say, the ball's inside the box. Oh, sorry, it's inside the basket. This child's like, what's wrong with you? How do you not know it's in the box, right? But you get to a point where you realize they're not trying to get it wrong. To the best of their knowledge, that's what they thought it was. For many of us, we have to learn this too. We have to learn that Maybe our parents did the best they could. Maybe they got some stuff wrong. And you can't attack them for that. You can't attack them for that. Sure, it may have had negative effects, but can you give them benefit of the doubt that they did the best they could? I think it's worth giving your parents that benefit of the doubt, right? To recognize that they may have done things that in your perspective are wrong or were not ideal, but to believe that, hey, they tried. They did what they could. Isn't that what you would want in those situations? Where you mess up, and you acknowledge I messed up, but hey, I was doing the best I could. I was severely mistaken, but I was sincere in my mistake. Do you get what I'm saying? And so to get to that level where you recognize people will have false beliefs, but they're actually sincere in those false beliefs. And it could be that what? It could be that this person just didn't have access to the knowledge that I have access to. They didn't have the privileges that I have privilege or access to. So today I feel so enlightened that I'm able to point out all the flaws in this person. Meanwhile, because of their mistakes and flaws and efforts, I'm able to enjoy this privilege. It's a weird position. Because I think sometimes we feel like we have to be either totally against or completely in favor of. Like we don't know how to hold sometimes balanced and nuanced views of people. Like this is a person who's doing the best they can. They're really screwing up. But they want to do better. But they're not doing better partly because of their circumstances, partly because the people around them. But they're trying. But yeah, they're really hurting the people around them. You see how that's back and forth? Acknowledging the good, noticing the bad, recognizing the circumstances, factoring in the people around them. You see all the different factors? And suddenly the human being is not a linear person, good or bad. You understand that? The dualistic thinking of good or bad. The world is just not that. The world is just not that. And so as we get older, we kind of develop that understanding. A child can also at some point realize that, wait, people can have emotions that they might be masking. For some of us, the day when we discover that, wow, someone was in pain this whole time and I never knew, that can have you question everything. Because you're like, I thought I knew this person. I thought we were close. I thought I knew everything about them. Today I find out something that was just totally hidden that eventually came to light. And you're shocked. You're like, wait, if I was deceived about them, I might be deceived about everybody. Do you get what I'm saying? But you realize that what you see is not always what you get. But that's part of being human. We have personas, we have masks that we wear. And sometimes we learn the hard way. Right? Maybe when you were in grade school, you had a friend who acted like your friend until they absolutely betrayed you. Right? And that was like the end of the world in grade 5. Absolutely. It hurt, right? How could they do that to you? How are you going to recover from that now? It means it's just downhill from there, right? No, but that's how we feel. And it's hard to trust. So we are impacted by the things around us. We find this in the life of the Prophet ﷺ. The importance of recognizing what people might be thinking and factoring that in. And I'll share a hadith here. This is a hadith in the Sunan of Imam al-Tirmidhi. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, he mentions that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if there's 3 people sitting there, then 2 people should not speak privately, excluding the 3rd person. Because that will hurt that 3rd person's feelings. It will sadden them. Look, if 2 people are speaking amongst themselves while a 3rd person's right there, isn't it possible that these 2 people are not speaking about the 3rd person? It's possible, no? It's very possible. But what's a very likely thought the 3rd person will have? that these two are speaking about me. Right? That these two are speaking about me. So the Prophet ﷺ said, so don't do that. He prohibited this act, not because these two people are actually talking about them, but because of the potential for that third person to assume that these two are speaking about them. Does that make sense? So which means what? If I'm going to speak to this person, I need to think, wait, what's that person probably thinking right now? They're probably thinking, I'm talking about them. So let me not do this then. Let me begin to adapt my behavior so that I don't unnecessarily hurt someone else. Does that make sense? But you can only do that if you recognize how others think and what they're thinking and how they might interpret an event. The author points out, and this is the last thing I'll say here for today. The author points out that initially, you know what this theory was called? Social brain theory? It was called the Machiavellian brain theory. Why? Because if you know what other people are thinking and how they're viewing the situation, you can manipulate that. If I know what you're thinking and how you're viewing the situation, I can now manipulate what you do. And so it's like the dark side of empathy. It's like the dark side of it, where you start using your empathy, your ability to understand and read people, to now begin to, deceive them, or even potentially use them. In psychology, it's called the dark side of psychology. Marketing, right? Where you understand the impact of what you're doing. No, seriously. You understand what you're doing. You're presenting something. And you know the impact it's going to have on the watcher, the viewer. You know the impact. So you present it. And you make them feel very insecure. Right? Because you present a standard that's unrealistic, say here. And as much as we know, this is a fascinating thing, we know that it's unrealistic. We know that it's probably photoshopped. We know that they're probably plastic surgery. But we think what? We start to feel self-conscious. We start to feel what? Insecure. So now that they've got us feeling insecure and deficient, now I have something for you to solve that. Let me create a problem, and now I'll give you the solution. And it's just $9.95 a month. And you're like, here, sign me up. Not realizing you were sold the problem, which is why you're looking for the solution. And so that's how you can use your understanding of other people. It's a very interesting thing. But humans can do this. You might say, well, wait, if you know how someone feels, how is it that you would use that against them? Because you have something called malevolence. Malevolence is when you hurt someone and you know you're hurting them. And you still do it. Because that's corruption of the soul. It's not enough to merely have, to have communication skills and emotional intelligence. It's to use it to a good end. Which is why it's so, it's such a trust and a manner to do that. And that's why there's ethics surrounding it in professional fields where people disclose. So that the person, because people are vulnerable in those moments. They've opened up. Now they're feeling very vulnerable. They're feeling insecure. They're feeling very embarrassed, shamed. You could do a lot with that. You could do a lot with that. You could easily take advantage of that. And in professional fields, we've seen people breach the ethics of it. But it takes a good, virtuous human soul to know. And that's what happens in relationships. You'll be in a relationship, you'll be married to someone, you'll know everything about them, all their flaws. You'll know their insecurities. But that's the beauty of that relationship, is that you have all this power that if you wanted tomorrow, you could completely embarrass them, but you would never do that. Because you have virtue in your soul. Right? And that's where marriage it's not for immature people. It's not for emotionally unintelligent people. It's not for people who have corrupt souls. Because the moment they have access to information, they'll leak it. And they'll use it against that person after the first dispute they have? Blackmail. And may Allah save us, because it's not a good thing. And so you notice how it always comes back to what? Virtue of the soul. May Allah Ta'ala grant us tawfiq to become people of virtue, to become people who possess emotional intelligence and who possess the ability to understand others and use it for khair and goodness. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين.